Did Adam and Eve truly have a choice, or was their fate sealed the moment they stepped into the Garden of Eden? The story of the first humans is one of the most debated and mysterious accounts in the Bible. It raises profound questions about free will, predestination, and the nature of God's creation. What if their disobedience was not just a mistake, but a test, a paradoxical event that defines humanity itself? In Genesis, we find Adam and Eve living in an earthly paradise, surrounded by abundant beauty and eternal peace. They walk with God, share in His creation, and are given dominion over the earth. But at the heart of this utopia lies a single command: do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The punishment for disobedience: death. It seems simple, an obvious rule to follow in exchange for eternal life in paradise. But was it? The introduction of the serpent changes everything. The Bible describes the serpent as more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. Genesis 3:1. With cunning words, it plants a seed of doubt in Eve's mind. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden"? The serpent's question is not just rhetorical. It's an attack on trust, an invitation to question the nature of God's authority. As the serpent tempts Eve, offering the promise of wisdom and godlike knowledge, we are faced with a profound dilemma. Was this truly a choice? If Adam and Eve were created by God, placed in a perfect environment, and yet faced with temptation they could not resist, how much agency did they truly have? Did they fail, or were they set up to fail? Some theologians argue that the test of the tree of knowledge was essential to the human experience. Without the ability to choose, Adam and Eve would have been little more than automatons, obedient but unthinking, faithful but without true devotion. By introducing the possibility of disobedience, God gave them the power of free will, the ability to choose Him or reject Him. But if this was a test, was it a fair one? Could beings with no prior knowledge of sin truly comprehend the weight of their decision? Others suggest that Adam and Eve's choice was an illusion. If God is omniscient and knew they would disobey, then their actions were predetermined. In this view, the fall was not just a test of free will, but a carefully orchestrated event. It was necessary for God's ultimate plan of redemption through Jesus Christ. But if their fall was part of God's plan, can we truly call it a choice? Or was it a paradox, a decision they had no power to avoid? The implications of this story extend far beyond the Garden of Eden. The tension between free will and divine sovereignty is a central question in theology and philosophy, one that resonates deeply with our own lives. How often do we wrestle with decisions, only to wonder later if our paths were already set? Are we free, or are we following a script we can't escape? As Adam and Eve reach for the forbidden fruit, the world holds its breath. Is this the moment humanity's freedom is born, or is it the moment it is lost forever? And as the fruit is plucked, we are left with a haunting question. Did they truly have a choice, or was this act of defiance inevitable, written into the fabric of creation itself? The moment Eve reached for the fruit and Adam followed, the world shifted forever. But was this act of defiance a true exercise of free will, or was it a step in a story already written? The consequences of their choice were immediate and catastrophic. In an instant, the innocence of Eden gave way to shame, pain, and exile. But beneath the surface of this ancient story lies an even deeper mystery. Were Adam and Eve truly free to choose, or was their fall inevitable? The serpent's promise was enticing. You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3:4-5. This was not just a temptation to break a rule. It was an appeal to their deepest desires, to know, to understand, to be like the Creator. But could Adam and Eve have resisted this temptation? If they lacked the knowledge of good and evil before eating the fruit, did they truly comprehend the weight of their decision? Some theologians argue that Adam and Eve's choice was a necessary step in the development of humanity. By eating the fruit, they gained not only the knowledge of good and evil, but also the ability to make moral choices. In this view, the fall was less about punishment and more about transformation, a painful but essential step toward human freedom. But this interpretation raises a paradox. If Adam and Eve were destined to fall in order to fulfill God's plan, were they ever truly free? Others point to the role of the serpent as evidence of a deeper plan. If God created the serpent and allowed it to tempt Eve, does this mean the fall was part of His design? Was the serpent a mere catalyst, or was it an agent of God's will? The Bible remains ambiguous, leaving us to wrestle with the question, was the serpent acting independently, or was it fulfilling a role in a divine script? This tension between freedom and fate is not unique to Adam and Eve. It resonates deeply with our own lives. How often do we feel torn between the illusion of choice and the pull of forces beyond our control. Are we free to shape our destinies, or are we bound by circumstances, biology, and divine purpose? Adam and Eve's story challenges us to confront these questions head-on, forcing us to examine the nature of human freedom. The consequences of their choice were immediate and devastating. Genesis 3:7 tells us that after eating the fruit, the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. Shame entered the world for the first time, followed by fear. When God called out to them, they hid among the trees, their relationship with the Creator fractured. This moment of hiding symbolizes humanity's estrangement from God, a separation that echoes through history. Yet even in their punishment, there are glimpses of hope. God clothes Adam and Eve in garments of skin, providing for them even as He exiles them from Eden. This act of mercy hints at a larger plan, one that extends beyond their fall. Could it be that their disobedience was not the end, but the beginning of a journey toward redemption? If so, does that mean their fall was part of God's plan all along? The paradox deepens. If Adam and Eve were truly free, then their choice to eat the fruit was their own, an act of rebellion with profound consequences. But if their fall was necessary for humanity's ultimate redemption through Jesus Christ, then was their freedom an illusion? Were they always destined to disobey, fulfilling a role in a story that began long before the garden? As Adam and Eve leave Eden, the weight of their decision becomes clear. Their choice, whether born of freedom or fate, has shaped the course of human history. But as they step into the unknown, another question lingers. Was their fall a tragedy, or was it the first step towards something greater? And if it was part of God's plan, what does that mean for our own struggles with free will and destiny? As Adam and Eve left Eden, they entered a world filled with labor, suffering, and mortality. But beneath this exile lies a deeper question. Did they fall by their own choice, or were they following a script already written? This paradox of free will and divine sovereignty is central to their story, forcing us to ask, are we truly free, or are our actions woven into a larger plan? If God is omniscient, then He knew Adam and Eve would eat the fruit before He even created them. He knew the serpent would tempt them, and that shame, death, and separation would follow. This foreknowledge makes their fall seem inevitable. Yet why would God create them knowing they would fail? Was their disobedience an act of rebellion, or a step in a divine narrative? Some theologians argue that foreknowledge does not negate free will. God may know the outcome, but He does not force the decision. By this view, Adam and Eve acted freely, even though God foresaw the consequences. But others challenge this interpretation, asking, can there truly be freedom if the outcome is predetermined? If their fall was essential to God's plan, could they have acted differently? If not, was their disobedience really their choice? The serpent's role complicates the story further. It is described as cunning, persuasive, and deliberate. Yet the serpent is also a creation of God. By allowing the serpent into the garden, did God introduce the possibility of sin? Its promise, "You will be like God, knowing good and evil," appealed to Adam and Eve's curiosity, but also their innocence. If they lacked the knowledge of good and evil before eating the fruit, could they fully grasp the gravity of their decision? Were they held accountable for a choice they could not completely understand? This paradox is one reason their story resonates so deeply. It reflects the tension we all feel between choice and inevitability. How often do we face decisions shaped by circumstances we cannot control? How often do we wrestle with guilt and regret, wondering if our choices were truly ours, or if they were influenced by something greater than ourselves? Yet, Adam and Eve's decision also redefined humanity. With the knowledge of good and evil came moral responsibility, the ability to choose between right and wrong, even with the risk of failure. Some argue that this is the essence of free will, the freedom to make meaningful choices, even if they lead to suffering. In this sense, their fall was not a failure, but a transformation, an essential step in the development of humanity. If God placed the tree of knowledge within their reach and allowed the serpent to tempt them, was the fall inevitable? If humanity was always meant to fall, was their freedom an illusion? These questions hint at a larger purpose, one that transforms their disobedience from a tragedy into the foundation of God's plan for redemption. In Christian theology, the fall sets the stage for the coming of Jesus Christ, whose sacrifice offers humanity a path back to God. Without the fall, there would be no need for redemption. This perspective suggests that Adam and Eve's choice, whether free or predetermined, was the first act in a divine drama that spans eternity. But if their fall was necessary, was it truly a choice? Did Adam and Eve fall by choice, or were they chosen to fall? Can true freedom exist in a world where God's will is absolute? And if their fall was part of a larger plan, what does that mean for our own struggles and decisions? Adam and Eve's story mirrors our own, filled with moments of agency and inevitability. But as we wrestle with these questions, one truth remains. Their decision has shaped not only the course of human history, but the very nature of what it means to be human. Yet as we grapple with their choices, one question lingers. If their fall was part of a divine plan, what does that say about the freedom we believe we have today? As Adam and Eve left Eden, clothed in garments of skin provided by God, their story didn't end. It began a narrative that would shape the destiny of humanity. The paradox of their choice, freedom or inevitability, echoes through history, but it also points toward a deeper truth: redemption. Was their fall a tragedy, or was it the first step in a divine plan that would ultimately lead to grace and restoration? Christian theology tells us that the fall set the stage for redemption through Jesus Christ. Romans 5:19 states, "For as by one man's disobedience the many were made sinners, so by the one man's obedience the many will be made righteous." Without Adam and Eve's disobedience, there would be no need for Christ's sacrifice. This raises a profound question. If their fall was necessary for salvation, was it truly a mistake? Or was it part of God's plan from the beginning? Theologians have long debated this mystery. Some argue that the fall was a felix culpa, a fortunate fault, because it led to the greatest act of love, God becoming human and offering himself for the redemption of the world. In this view, Adam and Eve's disobedience was not a failure, but a necessary step in a divine story of grace and reconciliation. But this interpretation raises its own paradox. If their fall was necessary, could it truly be called disobedience? And if redemption was always the goal, was their freedom real or an illusion? Others take a different perspective, emphasizing the consequences of their actions. The curse of pain, toil, and death became humanity's inheritance, a reminder of the gravity of sin. Yet even in judgment, God's mercy is evident. He did not abandon Adam and Eve. By clothing them, providing for them, and continuing his relationship with humanity, God revealed a plan that was not about punishment, but about transformation. This paradox of freedom and sovereignty isn't confined to Adam and Eve. It touches every aspect of human life. How often do we wrestle with choices, only to wonder later if our paths were predetermined? Are we free, or are we part of a larger story, one that bends toward redemption regardless of our missteps? Adam and Eve's story challenges us to see our own struggles and failures through a different lens, one that combines both accountability and hope. Their story also forces us to ask, what does it mean to be human? Is it our ability to choose, even in the face of temptation? Or is it the grace that meets us when we fall? Adam and Eve's journey reflects the complexity of our own lives. We are free to choose, yet bound by circumstances. We fail, yet we are offered redemption. Their story is not just about the beginning, it's about the ongoing process of becoming. In the end, the Garden of Eden is more than a place. It's a symbol of innocence, lost but not forgotten. It reminds us of what was, but also points us toward what can be. The fall may have introduced pain and death, but it also set in motion a plan for restoration, a plan that culminates in the promise of a new creation, where the separation between God and humanity will be healed. So did Adam and Eve have a choice? Perhaps the answer lies not in the question itself, but in what followed. Their story is one of paradox, freedom within sovereignty, failure leading to redemption, and a loss that paved the way for eternal hope. It challenges us to embrace the complexity of our own choices and to trust that in our failures, there is a path toward grace. As we close this journey into the paradox of free will, we're left with profound questions that extend far beyond Eden. Are we free, or are we following a divine plan? Can our failures become the foundation for something greater? And if Adam and Eve's story is our story, what does it tell us about the nature of God, the purpose of humanity, and the hope of redemption. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to explore more mysteries of faith, history, and the human experience.